my name is Lori Bumbaco. I'm an oncology dietitian, and I'm so happy to be a part of the Judy Nicholson Kidney Cancer Foundation in part of a segment called the Nutrition Mythbusters. So, part of my work as an oncology dietitian is to work with individuals one-on-one to help find specific recommendations tailored to their unique needs any time during their cancer continuum of care. But along the way, typically, I work with individuals, they ask great questions, and one in particular stands out. And that's why I thought we would start our segment with Nutrition Mythbusters, the most common question that I get received as an oncology dietitian. Well, let's start first with explaining what is a cancer protective diet. Well, if we think about it, we already know all of the foods that have an abundance of nutrients that support our health. And there are some special compounds in some of the foods that we eat that also exert cancer protective properties. You might have heard me share before, and I will continue to share what the experts advise is a whole food, plant-based diet. So that means an abundance of whole plant foods, from whole grains to fruit, vegetables, beans, and lentils, as well as nuts and seeds. Now, that way of eating also crowds out the potential of anything that is less cancer protective. So, those happen to be the highly processed foods and typically foods that are high in sugar. We all know sugary foods aren't really the best for us, right? They don't offer much nutrition. And if we rely on eating too much of them, too much of the time, we may pack on a little bit of weight. And that, as it turns out, is one way to set up a body that is pro-inflammatory if we gain too much weight over time. So inflammation is implicated in the carcinogenic process, and we want to pursue a way of eating as well as a lifestyle that is anti-inflammatory. So if we already know that these sugary foods are not the best for us, do we need to avoid them altogether? Or do we need to eliminate them because maybe they're making our cancer situation worse? Therein lies the question, the number one question that I get received as an oncology dietitian. Does sugar make my cancer worse? Did eating a lot of sugar give me cancer in the first place? Well, I'm here to help set the record straight and to try to give you the bottom line. So let's back up. Let's talk about that theory about sugar feeding cancer. Well, we all know that cancer cells are greedy. They like to eat. And they like to eat a lot of fuel very quickly. And the fuel source that they tend to use most often is glucose. And glucose is a simple sugar that comes from any food that we eat that contains carbohydrates. So if we eat something like a whole grain like farro or some fresh raspberries, they all will break down to glucose. When we eat sugary desserts, it also breaks down to glucose. And our body, in terms of the metabolism and cancer cells, doesn't know the difference of that type of glucose. If it's in a package with other cancer fighters, well, that's what we want to do. We want to try to eat those foods most often. But if cancer cells, are relying on glucose for energy, then why not cut out glucose altogether, right? Why not eat zero carbohydrates? Because then the cancer cells will have no fuel to rely on. Well, not so fast. It's not that simple. In fact, it's quite complicated. And research is still looking at this interesting relationship between cancer cells and their fuel sources. But let me help point out a few of the concerns that we have that go against that argument that sugar feeds cancer. The first is that cancer cells, as it turns out, they don't only use glucose for energy. In fact, they have been shown to use amino acids as well as fatty acids as a fuel source. So if we don't eat any carbohydrates or we don't eat any protein, which breaks down to amino acids, or if we don't eat any fat, which breaks down to fatty acids, what's left to eat? Not much, right? Secondly, we also know that our healthy non-cancerous cells, they love glucose too. And so there has been no proven way to intentionally redirect the glucose from the carbohydrates we eat to our non-cancerous cells. There's just no physical possible way we can do that. So those carbohydrate containing foods our healthy cells need too. Lastly, a severely restricted diet that eliminates carbohydrates is not advised for anyone with a diagnosis of cancer. The reason for that is that it could set that person up for malnutrition, because a severely restricted diet, especially one that eliminates all forms of carbohydrates, could cause weight loss, and it could cause muscle wasting, and it could cause that malnutrition. That is detrimental for anyone diagnosed and on active care for cancer. Now, the problem with eliminating all carbohydrates is that you'd be missing out on all of the cancer protective compounds, from vitamins to minerals to antioxidants and special phytochemicals that are only found in whole plant foods that happen to contain carbohydrates also. So you get a cancer protective package all in one that does, yes, contain carbohydrates, but quality carbohydrates because of the package that the food is in. We also know that quality carbohydrates have fiber, and this automatically changes how we metabolize the carbohydrates in that food. Now, the research also makes it pretty clear that we have not established that sugar causes cancer or stopping sugar will cure cancer. No definitive research has shown that that's the case. We do know that too much sugar, going back to my original point, too much sugar in an unhealthy diet, in an unhealthy lifestyle, is conducive to inflammation. It's also conducive to weight gain. So we know that that type of body might be conducive to cancer growth. And therein lies the potential connection between a high sugar diet and cancer. Now, fortunately, there's good news, and this is where I come in. We can help ourselves. So we can pursue a diet and a lifestyle that is anti-inflammatory. We can choose intentional foods that are going to help set us up for success so that we can infuse all of these cancer protective compounds into our body. And also anti-inflammatory compounds we could find in foods and intentionally choose them so that we could help ourselves along the journey. Now, the bottom line is that we know stopping the consumption of sugar will not stop cancer in its tracks. So having an occasional treat here and there, we shouldn't feel guilty or ashamed to do. After all, if a cancer protective diet includes mostly whole plant foods, that's going to minimize any potential risk of any sugary food that you might have here and there. Now, if you want more information and specific to your concerns, all you have to do is consult with an oncology dietitian, and he or she can help guide you in a more structured and unique way, because nutrition advice should not be cookie cutter. Well, I will share with you in our next video this month a way to implement this approach of eating. I have a recipe to share that seems fitting for Valentine's Day, and you might enjoy as part of your cancer protective diet. Thank you for watching this portion of Nutrition Mythbusters, and I hope to see you all soon.